In today's global economy, trust, transparency, and integrity have been more important. Businesses must comply not just with local laws, but with international standards across sectors and borders. As Ukraine aligns more closely with the European Union, compliance is becoming a cornerstone of sustainable growth and international cooperation. This course empowers a new generation of professionals to lead this change. Welcome to the Courses in Compliance Management, a future-facing interdisciplinary program created as a part of the EU-funded EU Compliance In4UA project, prepared in cooperation with leading universities from Germany, Portugal, Czech Republic, Poland and Ukraine. This course brings the European approach to compliance into Ukrainian higher education. Through a modern learning experience featuring podcasts, gamification, case studies, and digital collaboration, you will explore topics from anti-corruption laws to AI in compliance, from ESG reporting to whistleblower protection. Whether your goal is to work in public institutions, global corporations, or launch your own business, compliance management gives you the tools to succeed ethically, strategically, and sustainably. Join us on this journey, strengthen your expertise, shape a responsible future. Welcome to Compliance Management.
Dear colleagues, partners and students, welcome to this educational video on the European compliance management. You will hear expert lectures from European universities with their knowledge and experience in this field. Together with our partner from Germany, Portugal, Poland, the Czech Republic and Ukraine, we are building capacity in compliance management and sharing best practice in support educators, managers and students. Our goal is to help you understand how compliance management works in practice, how it can be effectively applied with experienced lectures, providing insight, practical examples, and guidance to show its application in real-life management. We hope this introduction will inspire you to learn about compliance management, apply it into your future professional activities, and embrace its philosophy, doing the right things in the right way for the right reason. Let's begin our journey.
We spoke last week about why this ethic and compliance area, why the ethics and compliance field is growing. And there are several drivers around this, why this is more relevant in the business context, especially in the international business context. So the internationality is growing, is increasing. Look at you. We have so many students from different countries here in the class. We have like 30 nations in this program, and the fact to work with people with different cultural backgrounds, with different educational backgrounds, with different understanding also of business practices and business standards, it's growing, it's increasing, it's natural, it's normal. But it means you have to know more than just working with your fellow people from your fellow country. You have to know more about the differences to behave in the right way. This is the internationality. New laws, because the complexity and the nationality is growing, and because there is failure in ethics and compliance, what we called lawmaking bodies, or the policymakers, so those institutions, the governments, the authorities that are responsible to give the frame of rules in which you can act, they feel invited to issue even more rules and more standards. Some recent examples would be the General Data Protection Regulation from European Union, which is very strict, and which is opposite to what you can see in the United States. Or the most recent example is the EU AI Act, the European Artificial Intelligence Act. So here the question is, how can we and how should we use artificial intelligence in the company context? New laws, new regulations, and you all as future professionals should know them. So these are some examples about new laws as drivers around ethics and compliance. Regulations, additional and new regulations coming in. Regulations are legal elements to implement laws. Yeah? They're not laws, they're regulations. You will learn about this next week. Yeah? But it's a growing set of rules. Plus the standards and practices that just evolve, that just develop, and practices that are developed in companies. Very often then companies come together, they understand that they have the same challenge, and they agree to create a new own standard, how to fulfill requirements. Yeah, the human behavior is changing, is shifting, it's developing. You know that everything is new to you, gets your full attention. If it's no longer so new, if it's no longer so interesting, if you get used to it, your attention goes down. Yeah? So this is a natural human behavior. We all do this. I do the same. Yeah? But in view to ethics and compliance requirements, we should be aware of this and make sure that we're always attentive, that we're always awake, that we always remember and made sensitive again. This means continuous training and coaching around what the requirements are. The cultural differences I mentioned, I bet there are different understandings in your heads right here, and we will talk about this later today because there was a task to think about ethical and compliance cases, dilemmas, maybe scandals even from your home countries. So we will learn about this today. Yeah, the world and the set of rules is getting more and more complex. And at the same time, we have more competition. And when competition is stronger and harder and you have to fight more for success, maybe the hurdle to not fully comply with the rules is getting lower because you want to have the success, the business success. And then you have to find the compromise between success and compliance, which is not a compromise at all. But sometimes it feels like, you know, just to get the deal done. So these are important drivers that drive the dynamics around the ethics and compliance topic. Any questions to this at this moment? For you, it's all new. For you, it's a repetition. Yeah, we looked last week at the spectrum of different types of ethical and compliance standards. This is what you will learn during the entire module, during the semester, that we will go deep dive into those aspects of what compliance could mean. On the left side, you see areas of compliance like product, tax, environmental, antitrust, competition, data, and anti-corruption compliance. And indicated with the color code on the right side, you see that each area consists of various topics that we can look at, but we will not get lost in the details today. We do this when it's time to. Yeah, that's an important slide to summarize what the true goal of ethics and compliance is. It's not to be the police in the company. It's not to penalize people. It's not to only educate or derogate people. You know? The basic understanding is, hey, let's prevent failures. Let's prevent problems. Let's prevent to get into trouble. You know? And if we cannot prevent it and it happens, let's detect it. If we don't detect it, we will never understand what happens. Yeah? And when we detected it and understand what happened, yeah, while we failed to comply with the rule, let's respond to it in the right way. Let's show as an organization, as a company, we can do better. Yeah? We are made of something better and we can fulfill the rules. And last but not least, and then let's correct it and make sure it doesn't happen again. So these are the 4 levels of how to respond, and this is kind of a style. This is kind of an attitude. This is a culture of an organization to truly accept, to trying to become an ethical and compliant organization. And here then the overall goal is self-governance. This can never be accomplished by getting pushed and pressed and prosecuted. No, this can only be accomplished if you want it. So the self-government is a principle here that you should set as a starting point, as well as transparency. Because without transparency, you will not prevent, detect, respond, and be able to correct. So it has a lot to do with culture. And in this class, I will teach you, of course, about the legal compliance and where it all comes from and what lawyers would tell you about it. But our program is different. We will focus on what we call the culture-based compliance. Culture-based compliance means, well, if I understand the rules, then it's on me on how to behave and how I live it. And this is more important for success than just knowing the rules and knowing the penalty. Let's make a simple example from sports. Soccer or cricket. You have to know the rules of the game. And I think every player knows the rules of the game, or should know, right? But it doesn't mean you're a good player. Then the way you play it, the way you do it, differentiates whether you are a big player, if you're a good team player, if you support the team, or if you want to be the lone star and the goal hitter. So your individual behavior determines what is the role you're playing in the game. Yeah, you need different characters and different types, but a team only wins together, or a team loses together. There cannot be winners and losers at the same time in sports, right? So the same idea you should transfer to the company environment and understand, well, this company either wins together with view to ethical and compliant behavior, or it will lose together.
Hello everyone, my name is Małgorzata Michalska-Nakonieczna. I'm a Vice Rector of WSPA in Lublin, so hugs from Lublin. And today I'd like to take you on a short journey through one of the keys foundation of modern compliance, corporate governance and ethical decision making. From a European perspective, governance isn't just about rules, hierarchies or paperwork. It's about trust. It's about making sure that every decision inside a company, big or small, is transparent, accountable and grounded in ethics. In the European Union, this approach is supported by strong frameworks like the Shareholders' Rights Directive II and new initiatives promoting sustainable corporate governance. These policies push companies to act responsibly, to think long-term and to consider the interests of all stakeholders, not just shareholders. And as European and as Ukraine moves closer to the European Union, adopting these principles becomes even more important. It's not about ticking boxes for compliance. It's about building credibility, showing investors and international partners that Ukrainian businesses are guided by integrity, by vision and by values. Let's start from the basics. What exactly is corporate governance? It's, in simple terms, corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled. It defines how power and responsibility are distributed between shareholders, management, employees, suppliers, and society. And at the heart of the system, we find four essential pillars: accountability, transparency, fairness, and responsibility. Accountability means that leaders are answerable for their decisions. Transparency ensures that information is clear and open. Fairness guarantees that everyone's voice is heard, not only those with the most shares. And responsibility reminds us that every corporate action has an impact: economic, social, and environmental. Now let's add another layer. ethical decision making. Ethical decision making is what keeps organization human. It's the moral compass that helps us make right choice, even when profit or pressure might tempt us otherwise. When a company builds its strategy on ethics, it doesn't just avoid scandals, it earns loyalty, respect, and long-term stability. To support this, many organizations use tools like codes of ethics, compliance committees, and whistleblowing mechanisms. This system helps guide employees and create a culture where speaking up is safe and doing the right thing is rewarded. Across Europe, we can see many examples of good governance in action. First, board diversity and independence. Many European countries now require independent directors or promote gender balance. Why? Because diverse teams think differently. And that diversity leads to better, more ethical decisions. Second, ESG integration. The combination of environmental, social, and governance goals. Modern companies are expected to care not just about their profits, but about the planet, the people, and the way they manage risk. Climate goals, human rights, supply chains responsibility. These are no longer optional. These are essential parts of doing business in Europe. And third, stakeholders engagement. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, now obligates companies to report how their decision affects not only investors, but also employees, communities, and the environment. It's a big step forward, one that turns transparency into action. Let me share a few real examples that illustrate how governance and ethics shape real outcomes. The Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. A painful example of what happens when ethical boundaries are crossed. Manipulating emission data may have seemed clever at first, but it led to massive financial losses, lawsuits, and most importantly, a collapse of public trust. It showed the world that poor governance can destroy a company's reputation overnight. Now, look at Ørsted, a Danish energy company. Just a decade ago, it was one of Europe's most fossil fuel-heavy businesses. But through transparent governance and bold ethical version, Ørsted transformed itself into a global leader of renewable energy. Today, it stands as a proof that ethical choices can also be profitable and powerful. And closer to home, here in Poland, companies listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange follow the best practice for GPW listed companies. This code sets clear standards for transparency, investor relations, and board responsibilities. It's a sign that ethical governance is becoming a permanent part of Poland's corporate culture. So why does all of this matter? Because corporate governance and ethical decision makings are not abstract theories. They are practical tools that help businesses stay strong, resilient, and respected, especially in a rapidly changing world. When governance is strong, companies can weather crises. When decisions are ethical, companies build trust. And the most valuable currency in today's global economy. For Ukraine, adopting these European standards will mean smoother access to European Union markets, stronger investors' confidence, and better reputation on the world stage. But beyond all that. It's about culture, about building organizations that act with integrity, take responsibility, and lead by example. Because compliance isn't just about avoiding fines or scandals. It's about doing what's right. Every day, at every level. And that's what creates sustainable growth, real progress, and lasting partnerships. Thank you very much.
We live in a connected world. Every day we buy, travel, communicate, and work through digital platforms that constantly collect and process our information. Personal data drives businesses, powers innovation, and improves lives, but it also defines who we are. Protecting that data means protecting people. This is the essence of data protection and the heart of the European's General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR. This video is about this and is connected with the EU Compliance M4UA project co-funded by the European Union. The General Data Protection Regulation came into force in 2018 and reshaped how the world handles information. It ensures that every person in every country of the European Union has control over their personal data. The GDPR applies not only to governments and universities, but to businesses, hospitals, banks, schools, digital platforms, and NGOs. Its message is simple. Privacy is not a privilege, it's a fundamental right. Data protection affects every part of our lives. It secures our identity, our financial records, health information, and digital footprints. It prevents fraud, discrimination, and manipulation. And it helps to build confidence between citizens, companies, and the public institutions. In the digital era, trust is currency, and the GDPR is the foundation of that trust. But what counts as personal data? Personal data is any information that identifies an individual, directly or indirectly, from a simple name or email address to biometric data, geolocalization or browsing behavior. It all matters, even when data is collected for research, marketing, or medical purposes. It must be handled with care. Only shared data can spread far, which is why responsibility must start at the moment of collection. GDPR is built on 6 key principles that apply to all organizations, private or public. The first one is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. People must know how their data is used. Purpose of limitation is the second one. The purpose of limitation: use data, which means to use data only for the reason it was collected. The third one is data minimization, to collect only which is strictly necessary. Accuracy, keep it correct and up to date. Storage limitation, do not keep data longer than you need. And the sixth principle is integrity and confidentiality, protect it from misuse, loss, or exposure. These principles form the foundation of compliance and ethical behavior. Compliance is not limited to lawyers or IT departments. It's a shared responsibility across all sectors. In healthcare, it protects patients' confidentiality and medical data. In businesses and finances, it ensures secure transactions and client trust. In education, it safeguards students and staff information. In marketing and digital media, it guarantees consent and transparency. And in public administration, it prevents misuse of citizens' data. The GDPR is not only a regulation, it's a framework for ethical decision-making. Consent is at the core of the GDPR. It must be freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous. Citizens have the right to access their data, correct it, delete it, transfer it, or withdraw the consent at any time. Organizations, in turn, have the duty to respond quickly and transparently. Accountability is more than compliance. It is the proof of ethical responsibility. And what about the future and AI? As artificial intelligence, big data, and automation evolve, data protection becomes even more critical. Innovation must go hand to hand with ethics. GDPR helps progress with protection, ensuring that human dignity remains at the center of technology. A future built on trust will always be stronger than one built on exploitation. Through the EU Compliance M4UA project, universities and experts across Europe and Ukraine are promoting a new generation of compliance leaders. Professionals who understand the law, ethics, and transparency are deeply connected. Together, they are helping build a Europe where data protection, integrity, and human rights form the backbone of public and private governance. Data protection is not just a regulation, it's a reflection of who we are and how we respect one another. This video was produced within the EU Compliance M4UA project, co-funded by the European Union.
Now that we know what compliance is and why does it matter in procurement, we can address the deadly sins of procurement compliance. And the first deadly sin I want to cover, and perhaps the most dangerous one, is what I would call the ignorance of the rules or risks, which is very often expressed by desperate statement which people say when they get caught or when they get caught up with a compliance problem, and that is, I did not realize that my behavior violated the law and compliance rules of my company. So let's take a real-life example and think about it together and try to come up with some learning points for our future practice so that we avoid these problems in future. So this is the case. There is a young buyer who is preparing a tender. Now, the buyer is really doing his job properly, so he meets with all suppliers and asks about their capacity, he asks about their cost structure, he asks about their sub-suppliers, he asks about innovations they might have, and he creates a comprehensive table and comprehensive analysis of what is the supply market situation and what would be the best strategy towards this tender. So far, so good. But now something happens which probably should not have happened. And that is the boss of this young buyer comes and say, let's say, Mike, this tender is of course a completely transparent and fair tender, but it would be good if supplier B won this tender. And the Mike asks, why? And he says, well, from strategic point of view, we would like to develop supplier B as our key supplier. We would also like to have a look at their investments and their global footprint, which are very, very attractive to us. And we have also some long-term relationship with the supplier, and we would like to capitalize on it in this tender. Mike says, okay, very good. So what should I do? And his boss tells him, well, maybe you should meet with supplier B and, share with them the information about the competition so that they can make the right offer, so that they understand where the danger comes from and what innovations are being proposed, just to have a discussion with them so that they can be well informed about what's going on and prepare a good offer. And Mike says, okay, let's do. So he does it, and then all suppliers submit their quotes, but despite, let's say, the effort, supplier B is still on the third place. So their offer is by far not the best. And so the boss comes again and says, Mike, there is such thing which we call a last call option, and it means that we grant our preferred supplier a possibility to give one more quote, and we will give them basically the best prices by their competitors and the best innovations and the best commercial conditions, and we will give them a chance to align. Now, if they cannot align, they cannot get the business. But if they can underbid the competitors, they will get the business. And Mike says, okay, very good. So he does it. And normally, in most companies, the story would finish here. Now, probably it's not the most transparent and fair way of doing tenders, but you know, this is very often the normal practice in companies. However, here, something different happens. A supplier A becomes suspicious because they gave really a great offer and because they can see that supplier B is coming up with innovations that they proposed themselves, and they were pretty sure that nobody knew about them. So they book a meeting with the CEO and they shared their suspicion. They say, you know, we would like you to investigate whether there is not something fishy in this tender. Now, we have no proofs, we have no, you know, substantial evidence, but it smells. And so the CEO says, well, you know, procurement non-compliance we take very seriously in this company. And so he launches an internal investigation. And obviously the investigation reveals what we already know, that the buyer revealed competitive pricing information and innovation and the commercial data to supplier B and allowed them to win the tender. And actually, this is a very serious violation, not just of the procurement guidelines, but it is actually the violation of the law. The paragraph in question is called the misuse of information in business dealings, and you can really get to prison for that, because the government is very sensible to fair business dealings, and of course information is a very valuable thing, so if somebody misuses it, well, they are liable to go to prison. Now, it doesn't get that far. The buyer is just fired, the tender is cancelled, the boss is fired as well, and you know, it ends up there. But of course the consequences could have been much graver or more serious if the supplier didn't go to the CEO but went to the police. Now, what can we learn from this case? Because, you know, we are not really interested in the past and in something which happened. But let's first analyze why it happened at all. And basically, most procurement codes of conduct explicitly forbid the misuse of information in business dealings. So it's forbidden to share competitive bid information. It is forbidden to disclose the sensitive cost or margin data. It is obviously forbidden to share innovation ideas to other suppliers. However, buyers are doing it. And the reason why they are doing it are maybe understandable, because buyers want to have as much competition as possible. They want to push suppliers to the lowest offers possible, and they do it by basically whispering this information, by fostering the competition. And is it non-compliant? Definitely. Is it illegal? Now we know that it is, but it's done anyway. And so imagine you are a young buyer, maybe you never studied the law, maybe you never studied, the code of conduct in detail, and you see all your colleagues doing it. So what will you do? Well, you will do the same, right? And the problem is that as long as nobody says anything, you can get away with this behavior. But the moment somebody says, you're dead. So this is the first deadly sin of procurement non-compliance, and that is, you do not know that you do not know. So basically, you do not do your homework by understanding what is acceptable procurement behavior, what is allowed by the law, what is allowed by the internal compliance procedure, and you just overstep, you just violate these rules because you are just not sensitive that you are doing it. And this happens very often to young people, and they tend to be very, very surprised when then, they are caught up by an internal audit telling them, hey, you violated the law, and be very glad that we will just sack you and don't put you, to court and through criminal procedure. So, my advice to young professionals how to avoid this first deadly and extremely dangerous sin is, first, get a trainer or a mentor who will emphasize to you the key compliance requirements and the key laws that govern the procurement job. And basically, as soon as you get to the border, you need to speak to somebody, yeah? So speak to a compliance manager, speak to senior management, or maybe, so to say, cover your backside and say, well, if you want me to do it, I will do it, but it is in breach of this compliance rule, and I want your written confirmation that I should proceed anyway. The second thing which we really should have is a cheat sheet. So a cheat sheet means like a very short summary of the key laws and compliance requirements which you must never ever violate. And that means it can be the laws, it can be the procurement rules, it can be the what we call the procurement and compliance red lines, and just have it on your table and never ever violate them. And last but not least is ignorance is not a defense. In many legal systems, it's said, well, just because you didn't know, it's not, making you innocent. Yeah, you should have known, and you should have acted in line with the laws. We say in Czech, the ignorance does not excuse. Yeah, so be very clear, especially if you are young, to make sure you understand, you learn, you have time to almost internalize the compliance rules and the compliance requirements. And these are both the laws and these are both the internal compliance procedures. And by the way, and I will finish with that, even when I teach senior managers and I tell them that this law exists against the abuse and misuse of information in business dealings, they are very surprised. And when I tell them these activities are actually illegal, they say, yeah, but they are my common practice. And I said, well, they may be your common practice as long as nobody finds out or as long as there is not a problem. But if there is a problem, you cannot say, well, I've been always doing that, because, as I say, ignorance of law is not an excuse for violating the law.